The hum of the long-range antenna array was a sound Leo felt more than heard, a constant vibration in the bones of the outpost that had become the backdrop to his life. On the screen in front of him, the raw data stream of deep space was a river of white noise, punctuated by the occasional blip of a distant pulsar or the faint, organized chatter of a human freighter passing light years away. His job was to watch the river flow, to note any changes, and to keep the dishes pointed at the void. It was a job for a patient man, a quiet man, a man with something to forget. "Papa, the song is back." Chloe's voice, soft and certain, cut through his thoughts. She was perched on a stool next to him, her small legs swinging, her attention on a secondary monitor where she was allowed to play with filtered data streams. At 5 years old, she had claimed this screen as her own, drawing fanciful shapes over the cosmic background radiation. "What song, sweetheart?" he asked, not taking his eyes from his own display. He learned early on that her songs were usually patterns she imagined in the chaos, constellations she saw in the digital snow, the one that sounds like rain on the roof. But sad, that made him look. Chloe had descriptions for things that were unnervingly accurate. The outpost's water reclamation system did make a sound like rain on a roof, a sound she'd only ever heard in storybooks, and it was, in its own way, a lonely, sad sound. He leaned over, looking at her screen. It showed a spectrograph analysis of a narrowband slice of the spectrum, one typically reserved for deep space cosmological studies. To him, it was a jagged, meaningless line. "Show me." She pointed a small finger at a nearly imperceptible, repeating dip in the graph. "There. It comes every time the big dish turns to the place where the broken star is." The broken star was her name for a nebulous remnant in the Cygnus arm. Leo felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He'd taught her the major landmarks of their sector, a way to pass the time. He hadn't expected her to memorize their rotational alignment schedules. "That's probably just interference, honey. From the nebula's radiation." It was the logical explanation. The only explanation. Chloe shook her head, her dark hair, so like her mother's, swishing. "No, the nebula sings a windy song. This is different. It's careful." The word hung in the recycled air. Careful. It was the same word she had used all those years ago when describing how her people mapped the gravitational tides. A careful touch, she'd said, so as not to disturb the silence. His name was Leo, and he was a ghost haunter. The ghost was a woman named Syrah, of the Stellan people. He'd met her 8 years ago, not on a station, but on her generation ship, the Luminous Wake, when his Navy vessel was providing escort through a contentious sector. He was a comms specialist. She was a junior cartographer. Their worlds could not have been more different. The Stellan were reserved, their culture built on precision and emotional control, seeing human effusiveness as a fascinating, chaotic flaw. But for 3 weeks, in the quiet corners of the vast ship, they had found a connection that transcended protocol. He showed her old Earth jazz, the sound of a saxophone weaving through silence. She showed him star maps that were not just coordinates, but histories, poems of cosmic evolution. They talked for hours, their conversations a delicate, thrilling bridge between the solitudes. Then it was over. A high-ranking Stellan official discovered their growing closeness and deemed it a contaminating influence. All contact was severed. The Luminous Wake changed its course, and Leo was reassigned. The last thing she'd said to him, her silver-flecked eyes holding his with an intensity that broke her people's norms, was, "I will find a careful way." He'd left the service not long after, carrying a grief he couldn't explain, and eventually taking this solitary post at the edge of known space. A year later, a child was left at a frontier station with his name and a note that contained only a Stellan, symbol for sanctuary, and a lock of hair that, in the right light, seemed to carry a faint silver sheen. Chloe. He looked from his daughter's earnest face back to the flicker on the screen, a ghost of a signal from the precise direction the Stellan ship had departed. A signal that sounded like careful rain. His professional mind screamed coincidence, anomaly, interference. But his heart, the heart that had been frozen in time for 8 years, hammered a single, impossible word against his ribs. "Syrah, Papa?" Chloe's voice was small, worried by his silence. "Did I do something wrong?" Leo pulled her into a hug. breathing in the scent of her hair-ordinary child shampoo, and something else. Something that sometimes, in his most fanciful moments, reminded him of starlight on cold metal. "No, my little star listener, you didn't do anything wrong at all." He sat her back on her stool, his hands trembling slightly. Can you show me exactly how you found it?" Every time, her face lit up with the joy of a shared secret. She nodded vigorously and began tapping at the console, pulling up logs and frequency filters with an instinctive grasp that went far beyond his taught skill. As she worked, weaving a narrative of her discovery, Leo watched the static on the main screen. The endless, indifferent noise of the universe seemed to shift. It was no longer an empty void to be endured, but a curtain, and behind it, a voice he never thought he'd hear again was trying, very carefully, to speak. The memory arrived not as a gentle wave, but as a riptide, pulling Leo under the moment Chloe's small finger traced that flicker on the screen. He was back on the luminous wake, 8 years younger, his dress uniform stiff and unfamiliar, the air smelling of recycled oxygen and something floral and alien ozone and night-blooming jasmine. The Stellan ship was a place of quiet majesty. Corridors curved into soft, organic shapes, and light emanated from the walls themselves, pulsing in a slow, rhythmic cadence that was meant to be calming, but set Leo's human nerves on edge. He was part of the liaison team, a lowly ensign meant to be seen and not heard, ensuring the communication protocols between the Stellan and the human escort vessel remained flawless. He first saw her in the main observatory. She was standing before a holographic star map that was so detailed it looked like a window into space itself. She wasn't just looking at it. Her fingers danced through the constellations, pulling streams of data, annotating gravitational eddies and dust clouds with a fluid, practiced grace. Her skin was the color of moonlight on water, and her hair, a cascade of deep obsidian, was streaked with a single, dramatic shock of silver from her temple. Her ears, elegantly tapered, twitched slightly as he approached. The only sign she registered his presence, the local cluster, he said, his voice echoing loudly in the quiet space. He'd meant to say something more professional. She turned, and her eyes were the color of mercury, flecked with tiny, brighter silver specks. They held no warmth, only a calm, analytical curiosity. "It is a map of the local cluster," she corrected, her voice a low, melodic hum. "The cluster itself is outside the hull." A flush crept up his neck. "Right, of course. I'm Leo, communications. I am Sira, cartography." She turned back to the map. "Your people navigate by coordinates, points on a grid. We navigate by stories. The life and death of a star, the drift of a nebula. They all leave a narrative in the quantum foam. So you're a storyteller," he said, leaning against a console, trying to recover his footing. For the first time, her expression shifted minutely, a slight narrowing of those luminous eyes. "I am a scientist. The narrative is data. It is simply a different kind of data than your people are equipped to perceive." That should have been the end of it. A brief, awkward exchange between two junior officers from incompatible cultures. But fate, or a glitch in the ship's routing computer, intervened. A scheduled cultural exchange, a tour of the Stellan hydroponics bay, was left with only two attendees, Leo and Sira. Their respective superiors had forgotten, called away to more important diplomatic briefings. For an hour, they walked in silence through tiers of glowing, alien flora. The air was thick with humidity and strange, sweet scents. The tension was unbearable. "This is inefficient," Sira finally stated, stopping before a plant with iridescent, bell-shaped flowers. "We are both fulfilling an obligation that holds no value. We could just leave," Leo suggested. "That would be a dereliction of duty. We could talk," he countered. She looked at him, truly looked at him, as if he were a new species of fungus. "About what?" He shrugged, gesturing around them. "About this. About your stories in the quantum foam. About why my people's music sounds like chaotic atmospheric re-entry to you." A flicker of something surprise crossed her face. "You read my cultural assessment log." I was bored. It was more interesting than the duty roster. That was the crack in the dam. Slowly, cautiously, they began to talk. He learned that her people valued stillness of being above all else. That overt emotion was considered a static that clouded judgment. She learned that humans saw their emotional spectrum not as a weakness, but as the core of their connection to the universe. Their meetings became a secret ritual. In quiet observation blisters and empty maintenance conduits, they built a bridge across the void between their worlds. He played her music, not the complex symphony she expected, but the raw, soulful ache of a Miles Davis trumpet solo. She, in turn, showed him her most precious maps, not of stars, but of unmapped spaces, the emotional resonance of barren planets, the silent songs of rogue comets. You seek to fill the silence with sound, she observed one day. Her head tilted as blue and green floated between them. We seek to understand the silence itself. Maybe the silence has something to say. If you know how to listen, he replied. Her hand, which had been resting on the console, shifted almost imperceptibly closer to his. It was a stellan gesture of profound trust. Your way of listening is very loud, a pause, but not without its melody. It was there, in the dim light of a navigation relay station, that he kissed her. It was not a passionate, human kiss, but a slow, hesitant meeting, a question asked and answered. Her lips were cool, and she trembled like a captured bird. When she pulled away, her mercury eyes were wide, the silver flecks within them seeming to swirl. That was an uncalculated variable, she whispered, her hand going to her lips. A good one? He asked, his heart pounding. The data is still processing. For a few stolen days, they lived in a world of their own making. They were no longer human and stellan, but just Leo and Sira, two souls who had found a resonance in the cosmic noise. He taught her to laugh, a soft, breathy sound that she tried to suppress but couldn't. She taught him to see the universe not as a place to be conquered, but as a story to be read. The end came as swiftly and coldly as a reactor breach. Her superior, a tall, severe man named Valen, found one of Leo's data chips, containing a recording of Etta James at last, tucked into Sira's personal terminal. The scandal was immediate. Leo was confined to his quarters and accused of cultural contamination. Sira was subjected to emotional recalibration, the last time he saw her. It was in a stark debriefing room. Valen was there, his face a mask of cold disapproval. Sira stood beside him, her posture rigid, her eyes distant, the silver flecks dull. She looked through Leo, not at him. The attachment has been severed, Valen stated flatly. The luminous wake will be departing immediately. Your vessel will receive new coordinates. All records of this incident will be purged. As Leo was led away, his eyes locked with Sira's. For a fraction of a second, the stillness in her gaze broke. A torrent of anguish and apology flashed in her eyes, so raw and human it stole his breath. Her lips didn't move, but her hand, hidden by the folds of her robe, formed a delicate, intricate shape, a stellan symbol he didn't recognize. Then the door hissed shut, and she was gone. Back in the outpost, Leo stared at the flicker on Chloe's screen, the ghost of a signal. The pattern was faint, but now that he knew what to look for, he could see it. It wasn't random. It was a sequence, a careful, repeating sequence. It was the same symbol Sira had made with her hand all those years ago, a symbol he now understood, after years of secret, painful research. It meant I remember. The next 72 hours were a blur of covert action and suppressed panic. Leo's world, which for years had been defined by the monotonous rhythm of the outpost, was now a high-wire act. On one side was the ghost of Sira, calling to him from the void. On the other was his very real, very perceptive daughter, and the ever-watchful eyes of his superior. Ben. Ben was a man who had seen it all. A veteran of the frontier, he ran the remote outpost with a gruff, no-nonsense demeanor that hid a deep, pragmatic kindness. He knew Leo's history, or at least the broad strokes of it: the Navy, the Stellan incident, the sudden appearance of a child. He'd never asked questions, simply giving Leo the job and the solitude he so clearly needed. You're jumpier than a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs, Ben observed, leaning in the doorway of the control room with a steaming mug of synthetic coffee. His eyes, set in a weathered face, flicked from Leo's tense shoulders to Chloe, who was utterly absorbed in her screen. Just trouble with the calibration on dish 7, Leo lied, his fingers flying across his console. routing the mysterious signal through a series of encrypted buffers. Atmospheric distortion. Ben took a slow sip. Right, distortion. And the little one? She helping you with that? Chloe, without looking up, said, I'm helping Papa listen to the careful rain. Leo's blood ran cold. Ben's eyebrows crept towards his hairline. He said nothing for a long moment, just watched them. Then, he pushed off the doorframe. Well, don't let the rain drown out the priority channels. We've got a corporate inspection drone due next week. They get twitchy about unauthorized bandwidth. The warning was clear. The Galactic Communications Corporation, which funded the outpost, valued efficiency and obedience above all else. Chasing personal ghosts in the deep space static was a fireable offense, at best, once Ben was gone. Leo knelt beside Chloe. Sweetheart, we have to be careful, like the signal. We can't tell anyone about our project, okay? Not even Ben. Her mercury-flecked eyes, so like her mother's, were serious. It's a secret song, yes, a very important secret song. Together, they became partners in the conspiracy. Chloe, with her preternatural ability to find patterns, acted as the signal's amplifier. She would guide Leo, telling him which filters to apply, which frequencies to isolate. Her intuition often proving faster than his analytical approach. She described the signal not as code, but as a feeling, a warm, sad feeling that pulsed in a specific rhythm. Leo, using skills he hadn't touched since his Navy days, began the painstaking work of decoding it. It wasn't a voice message or text. It was pure data, compressed and layered. With Chloe's help, they peeled back the layers and a picture began to emerge. Star charts, not the standard navigational ones, but the kind Siri used to make maps filled with contextual data. Gravitational tides and mineral densities. They were maps of a specific, little-traveled sector on the galactic fringe. And at the heart of the maps was a single, pulsing coordinate. Along with it, the symbol repeated, over and over. I remember, the corporate inspection arrived not as a drone, but as a man. Davenport was all sharp angles and crisp suits, his datapad an extension of his hand. He audited their logs, their power consumption, their bandwidth allocation with the grim satisfaction of a tax collector. Anomalous spike in processing power on the tertiary array. 3 days running, Davenport stated, his voice clipped. Explanation? Leo's mouth went dry. He was about to stammer out an excuse about diagnostic routines when Ben stepped in. That was me, Ben said, not looking up from his own console. Running long-range diagnostics on the quantum entanglement hardware. Standard procedure before an inspection. Paperwork's filed in the log. Section 4, subsection beta. Davenport's eyes narrowed, but a check of the log which Ben had clearly falsified with impressive speed confirmed it. The inspector grunted, moving on to scrutinize their water reclamation efficiency later. After Davenport's ship had departed, Leo found Ben in the mess hall. Ben, thank you. Ben stared into his coffee. I didn't do it for you. I did it for the kid. She deserves to know where she comes from. He finally looked at Leo, his gaze steady. I covered for you this time. But you're playing with fire, Leo. That signal, if it's who you think it is, you're inviting a world of trouble. The Stellan don't like loose ends, I know, do you? Ben sighed. What's the message? Leo showed him the decoded data on his tablet, the coordinates, the symbol. Ben whistled softly. The NGC 281 sector. That's the middle of nowhere. A good place for a secret. He pointed a blunt finger at the symbol. And that, it means I remember. For a long time, Ben was silent. Then he said, the outpost's old courier ship. It needs a shakedown cruise. Systems check. Can't have it gathering dust. A run to those coordinates would be a good test. Take a week. Leo stared at him, overwhelmed. Ben, I can't ask you to do that. You didn't ask. Ben grunted, standing up. And if anyone asks me, you stole the damn keys. Now get out of here. And take your daughter with you. The silence in this place is going to be a hell of a lot louder without her. As Leo hurried to prepare, the final piece of the signal decoded. It was the last layer, the one Chloe had called the heart of the song. It wasn't a map or a symbol. It was a simple, short audio file. When he played it, it was just a few seconds of sound. The clear, melodic notes of a single trumpet from Miles Davis, Blue and Green. The song he had played for her. The silent reply was over. The conversation had begun. The courier ship, the wandering star, was a cramped, temperamental bucket of bolts, but its engine hummed with a reliable warmth that felt like hope. For 3 days, they journeyed through the void. The star-dusted blackness outside the viewport both terrifying and exhilarating. Chloe spent most of the trip with her face pressed to the glass. Her resonator, now a jumble of wires and circuits she'd insisted on bringing humming softly in her lap. "Is she really blue?" Chloe asked for the 10th time, her breath fogging the cool transparistel. "Her skin is like moonlight," Leo said, his standard answer. He was focused on the navigational console, the pulsing coordinate their only destination. His stomach was a tight knot of anticipation and dread. What if he was wrong? What if it was a trap, as Ben had warned? What if, after all this, she looked at him with the same cold, distant eyes as in that debriefing room? The ship's proximity alarm chimed, a soft ping that echoed in the small cabin. They had arrived. The NGC 281 sector was a canvas of cosmic wonder. Vast, glowing nebulae in shades of magenta and violet stretched across the view. And the starfield was so dense it looked like a spill of diamond dust. And there, hanging in the silence, was a ship. It was not the massive, city-like luminous wake. This vessel was small, sleek, and elegant, its hull a matte gray that seemed to absorb the surrounding starlight. It was a personal craft, a scout ship. It drifted, powered down, waiting. Leo's hands trembled as he brought the wandering star to a matching drift, 100 meters away. He opened a standard hailing frequency. The channel crackled to life with silence. Then, a voice he had spent 8 years trying to forget filled the cockpit. It was softer than he remembered, laced with a tension that made his heart ache. Leo. It was just his name. But in that one word, he heard 8 years of silence, of longing, of fear. He could barely form a reply. "Syrah." The airlock cycled with a hiss that sounded like the universe holding its breath. Leo stood, one hand holding Chloe's, as the inner door slid open. On the other side, in the connecting tunnel, stood Syrah. She was just as he remembered, and yet completely new. The moonlight on water skin, the elegant tapered ears, the shock of silver in her hair. But the rigid stillness was gone, replaced by a palpable, human anxiety. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, and her mercury eyes were wide, shimmering with unshed tears. She was wearing simple, functional gray clothes, not the formal robes of her people, and cradled against her leg, half hiding behind her, was a boy. He looked to be about 4, with Syrah's same silver-flecked eyes and a smaller, softer version of her tapered ears. His skin was a shade paler than hers, almost ivory. He stared at Leo and Chloe with a mixture of intense curiosity and caution, his small hand clutching the fabric of Syrah's trousers. For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the hum of the ships and the soft, rhythmic pulse of Chloe's resonator. Then, Chloe took a small step forward, pulling her hand from Leo's. "You're the careful Rain," she said to Syrah, her voice full of wonder. Syrah single quotes as composure broke. A single, silver tear traced a path down her cheek. She knelt, bringing herself to Chloe's level. "And you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You are the song I have heard in my dreams." Her gaze lifted from Chloe to Leo, and in her eyes was all the love, loss, and hope he had carried for 8 years. "This is Kale," Syrah said softly, gently nudging the boy forward. "My son. Our son." The words landed with the force of a physical blow. "Our son." Leo's eyes met the boy's, and he saw at his own stubborn chin, the shape of his eyes, all blended with Syrah's otherworldly grace. He had a son. Chloe, with the uncomplicated diplomacy of a child, solved the impasse. She walked up to Kale and held out her resonator. "It hears the rain," she explained. "Do you want to see?" Kale looked from the strange device to his mother's encouraging nod. He released his grip on her trousers and took a tentative step forward. He reached out a small hand and touched the resonator. It immediately hummed louder, the pulse synchronizing with the rhythm of the signal they had been tracking. A slow, shy smile spread across Kel's face. It knows the song, he said, his voice a quiet, melodic echo of his mother's. Leo finally found his voice. His eyes still locked with Syrah's. You came. You listened, she replied, rising to her feet. The distance between them was only a few meters, but it felt like a chasm they were both afraid to cross. I have been adrift since I left the luminous wake. I could not live with the stillness anymore. Not after knowing your noise. She gestured to the small ship around her. This is all I have. I am exiled. We weren't alone, Leo said. The full meaning of the title he'd been given finally settling in his soul. He looked at Chloe, then at Kale. We were never alone. He closed the distance between them. He didn't kiss her, not yet. The moment was too fragile, too profound. Instead, he reached out and took her hand. It was cool in his, and it trembled. He laced his fingers with hers, a simple, human gesture. Her fingers tightened around his, a desperate, answering grip. They stood there in the airlock. Two lost souls who had found their way back to each other. Their two children now sitting on the floor, heads together, completely absorbed in the shared language of a humming machine. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was filled with the beating of two hearts, finally back in rhythm, and the quiet, hopeful sounds of a family, against all odds, beginning to form. The wandering star and Syrah's ship, which she called the Quiet Resolve, traveled in tandem for a week, a tiny, two-vessel convoy heading for the frontier. They found a small, terraformed moon on the very edge of charted space, a place called Haven. It was a colony of maybe 1,000 souls, miners, ex-Navy artists, and others who, for their own reasons, needed to be far from the cores of both human and Stellan influence. It was a place where no one asked questions. They pooled their resources and leased a small, prefabricated habitat on the edge of a vast, violet-hued forest. The air was clean and sharp, and at night, the sky was a breathtaking tapestry of unfamiliar constellations and the swirling, luminous bands of a nearby nebula. The first month was a delicate, awkward dance. Leo and Syrah were strangers who knew each other's souls. They moved around each other in the small habitat, a tangle of unspoken histories and a fierce, protective love for the children, who had bonded with the ease of water finding its level. Chloe and Kale were inseparable. They shared a room, their whispered conversations a blend of standard and the few stone words Kale taught his sister. Her resonator and his holographic star projector were permanently linked, filling their corner of the home with soft light and ethereal music. One evening, Leo found Syrah standing on the porch, looking up at the nebula, her arms wrapped around herself against the chill. You're quiet, he said, handing her a warm mug of tea. I am processing, she said, the old, familiar term feeling different now. It is a lot of data, this life, the noise, the happiness. It is chaotic. Is it a good chaos? She turned to him, and the nebula's light reflected in her mercury eyes, making them look like swirling galaxies. It is the best chaos I have ever known. She sipped her tea. On my ship, the silence was a prison. Here, the silence between our words. It is full. It has weight. It has meaning. He moved to stand beside her, their shoulders not quite touching. We don't have to have it all figured out, you know. We can just be, one day at a time. That is the most illogical and beautiful human philosophy, she murmured. Their relationship rebuilt itself not in grand gestures, but in small, domestic moments. He learned that she hated the texture of synth eggs, but loved the smell of real coffee, a luxury he now worked hard to provide. She learned that he snored when he was exhausted, and that his laugh, when it was truly genuine, could fill the entire house. They started working together, offering their services to the colony. Leo, the communications expert, helped boost their weak interstellar link. Syrah, the cartographer, began mapping the moon's uncharted interior, her unique skills revealing rich mineral deposits the colonists had missed. One night, Kale had a nightmare. Leo heard his soft cries and went to him. The boy was trembling, caught in the throes of a bad dream. Without thinking, Leo gathered him into his arms, humming an old, half-remembered lullaby. Kale's small body relaxed, his head resting against Leo's chest. When Syrah appeared in the doorway, her face etched with worry, she saw her son sleeping peacefully in his father's arms. The look she gave Leo was one of such profound, unguarded love that it stole his breath. The next evening, after the children were asleep, she found him at the kitchen table, reviewing communication schematics. "Leo," she said, her voice firm. "We must talk." His heart stuttered. This was it. The moment she would say it was too much, that she missed her people, that the chaos was too great. She sat down, taking his hands in hers. Her touch was sure now, no longer trembling. "I have been running for a long time, first from my people, then from my past, then towards a hope I was not sure existed. I am done running." She took a deep breath. You, the children, this noisy, illogical, beautiful life. This is my home. You are my home." He felt a pressure in his chest release, a weight he had carried for 8 years finally dissolving. "You are my home, too, Sira. You always were." He leaned forward and kissed her. It was not the hesitant, questioning kiss of the luminous wake. It was a kiss of homecoming, of promise, of a future they would build together, one careful, chaotic day at a time. Weeks turned into months. One afternoon, they were all in the clearing behind their home. Leo was trying to fix a malfunctioning ground vehicle. Sira was annotating a new mineral survey, and the children were building an elaborate fort from fallen branches and glowing moss. Chloe, her hands covered in dirt, stood back to admire their work. "It's a castle," she declared. Kale, ever the pragmatist, shook his head. "It is a star base, see? This is the command tower." "It can be both," Leo said, wiping grease from his hands. "A castle-starbase." Sira looked up from her datapad, a soft smile on her face. She watched them, her brilliant, human daughter, her thoughtful, Stellan son, and the man who had taught her heart to sing. They were no longer two separate families, forced together by circumstance. They were a single, unique constellation, a new pattern written in the starlight. Leo walked over and put his arm around her, pulling her close. They stood together, watching their children negotiate the terms of their shared imaginary world. "We built this," Sira said softly, leaning her head against his shoulder. Leo looked at the messy, noisy, perfect scene. The vehicle half repaired, the maps scattered on the table, the children laughter echoing in the violet-tinted air. It wasn't the life he had imagined, nor the one she had been raised for. It was something better. It was theirs. "Yeah," he said, kissing her temple. "We built this," and in the quiet harmony of their shared silence, surrounded by the family they had created against all odds, the last of the static finally cleared.